Well, welcome to our 2024 Nova Conference. We love these opportunities to connect and we're so delighted that you're joining us. I'm Susan Prescott, Director of the Nova Network and Professor of Planetary Health at the University of Western Australia, and it's my pleasure to be chairing the conference. I would like to start with our customary acknowledgement to celebrate all people, places and our planet. We come from many places and many traditions, so we acknowledge all wisdom, past, present and emerging, and the spirit of the earth and of all of us in community that sustains us with great love, respect and gratitude. Thank you. We hope that you've been enjoying our campfire events throughout the year, and this final bonfire for 2024 is a wonderful way to look over the horizon to new possibilities. And as we look to the future, it's more meaningful and more powerful if we can be aware that the future is looking to us for our choices today. And that is the message of our conference theme video that we'll play in a moment, a message from the future. So we'll do that now. Thank you, Lachlan. Well, I hope that brings you as much joy as it brought me in creating that, or should I simply say, passing on that message from the future. Now, this meeting would not be possible without the vision and support of the Nova Institute, and I would like to invite Brian Berman, President of Nova, to add a few words of welcome. Thank you, Brian.
Well, hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Brian Berman. I'm President and founder of the Nova Institute for Health, and I am delighted to welcome all of you to Nova's annual conference. And thank you, Susan Prescott, Nova Scholar and Director of the Nova Network, for once again masterfully organizing this annual event, and such a beautiful opening video that said everything. It's such a timely topic that brings us together today to talk about new horizons and how we can move towards an era of global flourishing. Nova's annual conference has become a tradition that I really look forward to. It provides a special time and place to learn about new ideas and hear from inspiring and innovative thought leaders. And it's a unique opportunity to connect with all of you. coming here today from so many different places and different backgrounds. Each of you bringing your light to share and to shine. Having this space and this time to connect and collaborate with each other and to build community, especially now around the united purpose, global flourishing, seems really important when we see so much divisiveness, fear, and threats at so many levels across the globe. For 17 years now, I've had the honor and the privilege to lead the NOVA Institute. And NOVA is a heart-centered think tank that takes action for the good of people, places, and the planet. And our mission is to catalyze new ideas in health and explore the complex network of factors that influence health and promote the well-being of individuals, communities, and the planet. And as I thought about NOVA's mission and the theme of this morning's session, one of restoring energy and vitality, it reminded me of the basic tenets of traditional Chinese medicine, which sees energy called qi as the vital life force that sustains all living things, including the human body. And as a doctor trained in Western medicine, when I studied traditional Chinese medicine so many years ago, I learned about a perspective on life and on health that sees the total lived experience as the balance of energy between all internal and external factors. Energy flowing and moving is what keeps things in balance. The change of seasons, the cycles of renewal and transformation. And even in difficult times, perhaps especially in difficult times, we can understand there are seasons and there will be transformation if we can embrace that flow and take actions like we'll hear about today, where we can and will make a real difference with the goal of good health and flourishing for all people everywhere. And this is no small task. But with the speakers we'll hear from today, and with all of you, I believe we can embrace change and keep that interconnected and positive life energy flowing. Because truly, what choice do we have? And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Susan.
Thank you so much, Brian. And next, to bring us to co-create this special space for our discussions, I would like to invite Rick Scott to guide us through a mindful moment of connection. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Susan. So let's begin by finding a comfortable position and just take a moment to calm our bodies and our minds. Take a few relaxing breaths to center into this space. No need to change your breathing in any way. And if you would like to, gently close your eyes or allow your gaze to soften. Allowing yourself to be fully present in this moment. Now bring your awareness to the life-giving energy and vitality and love within and all around you. And as we sit in silence for the next few moments, I invite you to imagine this love as a beautiful light that fills our being, connecting each of us and shining forth in the world. When you are ready, return your attention to this space and gently open your eyes.
Well, thank you so much, Rick. Now, just to overview our schedule, this year we have a shorter event, just 2 sessions to respect everyone's time. And as with all of our events, we have a series of short talks by panelists, generally around 5 minutes each, with the exception of our first speaker. Because this is a large panel, we aim to have an interim discussion about halfway, time permitting, as well as at the end of the panel. And this is open to everyone, so please have some questions or comments ready. I'm going to kick off the panel now with my 5-minute introduction to frame the conference and to introduce our first speaker, the wonderful Gary Zukov. At our last conference, we built up to the need to shift consciousness to achieve a better future. At this event, that's going to be our starting point. So let's go with my presentation. Thanks. These gatherings provide a wonderful opportunity to share diverse perspectives and address our challenges with fresh insights. While tackling present issues is vital, it's equally important to envision the future we want for our children and future generations, and to identify what actions we can take today to realise that vision. We will centre our discussions around flourishing because this inspires a more expansive and holistic perspective of health and well-being that includes both natural and human-made systems. Flourishing reflects the energy and vitality and dynamic interconnectedness of all living systems, encouraging an ecological mindset rooted in thriving, reciprocity, deep connection and relationality. It also emphasises fairness and justice and the ability of all people to make healthy choices for ourselves, our children, our communities, and the environments that support us. Many of our current systems fail to support the health of individuals, communities, and our planet. Human attitudes and actions are degrading not only our biosphere, but also our psychosphere, the health of our collective consciousness. There's an urgent need for change, and this session focuses on what we can do today to create a healthier tomorrow, emphasising relationships and our transgenerational responsibility to ensure a sustainable future for all. Energy is a central theme of this meeting. Everything in the universe is energy. All matter, from star systems to cells, is a manifestation of energy. All life depends on energy flow, primarily from the sunlight which sustains ecosystems and the food we consume. Human civilizations rely on large-scale energy systems for warmth, shelter, transportation and manufacturing, making energy fundamental to nearly all of our challenges. Unhealthy approaches to energy production and consumption harm individual and collective well-being, as well as our natural environment. Later today, we will explore the future of energy systems at the global scale with some profound insights. In this session, we'll focus on the factors that support or undermine the energy needed for personal and community flourishing, recognising that these are interdependent. Energy and vitality are crucial for personal flourishing, yet energy dysregulation is a hallmark of most chronic diseases, with mitochondrial dysfunction emerging as a central factor. Mitochondria are essential for energy production and cellular repair and are highly sensitive to environmental factors. They're even capable of responding to subtle biofields, including sound vibrations. But modern environments disrupt these delicate energy systems, leading to oxidative stress, metabolic dysregulation and inflammation, the hallmarks of chronic non-communicable diseases like diabetes, cardiometabolic disorders, immune diseases and neurodegenerative and mental health conditions. Key contributors include overnutrition, which generates free radicals, oxidative stress and DNA damage, nutrient-poor ultra-processed foods laden with artificial additives, declining microbial diversity and nature deficit, exposure to toxins and pollutants, physical and emotional stress, inactivity, artificial light, circadian disruption and sleep disturbances. Together, these many factors can undermine mitochondrial function from an early age. We can't restore human vitality and well-being without also restoring the health of our environment, with future generations in mind. Yet, vitality and flourishing extend beyond these physical dimensions of energy. Vitality embodies a sense of aliveness, amplified by our awareness of inherent connections to all things. It is fueled by awe, joy, wonder, and other positive emotions experienced in moments of deep inspiration or connection. These positive emotions are essential for physical, emotional, and spiritual health, influencing both lifespan and our health span. Flourishing encompasses not only physical, social, and economic resources, but also relationships, fulfillment, happiness, purpose, and meaning from the earliest moments of life. It also underscores the importance of cultivating virtues like honesty, curiosity, fairness, and kindness from a young age as the foundations of lifelong well-being. No discussion of flourishing is complete without considering the unseen energies of the human spirit and the mysteries of consciousness. Awareness of relational energies and interactions between the seen and the unseen has been central to ancestral and indigenous knowledge for millennia and remains core to many spiritual communities. While often overlooked in Western society, there is a growing recognition that purpose, meaning, and the emotional assets drawn from our inner resources and spirituality are essential to human flourishing. Can we aspire to a greater vision that invites the more powerful energy of connected consciousness? From this vantage, we can become more aware of the intricate connections between all systems at every scale to better understand what we need to do today to improve tomorrow for people, places, and our planet, giving much deeper meaning to the concept of potential energy. It's now my enormous privilege to introduce our first speaker, Gary Zukav, best-selling author and pioneer in human consciousness. Gary is co-founder of the Seat of the Soul Institute. He's a Harvard graduate and former Green Beret. His groundbreaking work has inspired millions worldwide, including through his numerous appearances on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Gary will speak for about 10 minutes and then I'll introduce our wonderful panelists, each sharing for 5 to 6 minutes. Please explore their bios via the link in the chat so we can make the most of everyone's time. So welcome, Gary. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience and thank you for that beautiful introduction. I feel so warm and at home here. And I couldn't have imagined a more beautiful video or introduction for a gathering of us humans. And I want to share with you some experiences that I've had. And I want to say at first, I suggest that you not take anything that I say as so simply because I say it. And I suggest that you not do that with anything that you hear from anyone. But instead, if you resonate with anything that's meaningful to you, that you instead experiment with it and then see what that experiment leads to. And if it's something that you like, experiment some more. You said that the need for a shift in consciousness for spiritual and cultural transformation is core to our agenda. It's core to our consciousness. It's core to our survival. It's core to our well-being. It's core to every sense of flourishing for every form of life. I have some wonderful news to share with you, and I feel that all of you already know it, but I enjoy sharing it so much I like to do it again. We are in the midst of an enormous, unprecedented, epic transformation of human consciousness. In my experience, it began about a generation and a half ago. And it will be complete in another generation and a half or so. This transformation of consciousness is a transformation from the limitations of the 5 senses and the understanding of power as the ability to manipulate and control into a consciousness that is not limited by the 5 senses and that understands power as the alignment of the personality with the soul, with harmony, cooperation, sharing, and reverence for life. This new consciousness is a potential. It's not a gift like the new consciousness itself. It must be created. And it's essential that we create it because the old consciousness is now toxic. It's counterproductive to our evolution. It produces only violence and destruction. As we move collectively into this new consciousness, We begin to see, and by see, I'm not talking about ocular vision. I'm talking about seeing in a fuller, deeper, richer, more meaningful way than we could have ever imagined. Not a new reality, not another reality, but an extension or a larger reality of which we are an extension. And by we, I'm talking about those of us who are living today in this educational environment that we can call the Earth School. It's a domain of time and space and matter and duality and fear, none of which exist outside of this Earth School. Our curriculum in this school is love. Our class is creating authentic power. Authentic power is love. There's no greater power. Since I'm suggesting that we are in the midst of a transformation species-wide that has never happened before, where can we see that? Can we look around and see it? Yes. But what you see when you look around may surprise you when you try to relate it to a new consciousness that is beneficent in every way and is giving each of us now, or revealing to each of us now, capabilities and opportunities that we have never had before. Can we see it when we look inside of us? Yes, most definitely, because this is where this transformation is happening. And I'd like to say that in my experience, it's not a transformation that is happening to us or in us. We are the transformation. You are the transformation. What you do, what you say, what you call into being with your actions and your choice of intention is significant. You may think of yourself as insignificant. Frightened parts of your personality do, but you are not, and you know that. You are a powerful and creative, compassionate, and loving spirit. And the pain in your life is a measure of the distance between this reality and your self-image. We are talking now about closing that distance to zero. That is what the Earth School allows you to do. It is an arena in which you learn love and responsibility and choice. Choice is your power. You are a chooser. You cannot stop choosing. You cannot even choose to stop choosing because that's a choice. And it's your choices that create your reality, but not your choices. It is the intention behind your choices. And in the Earth School, there are only two fundamental choices, options available to us: love and fear. And at every moment, your life is bringing you to circumstances that necessitate, that require a choice. And this is your only choice, love or fear. It is the continual choice. It's an important choice because when you choose love, you create certain consequences, and all of them are beneficial, healthy, blissful. And when you choose fear, you create the opposite, destructive consequences that are unhealthy and painful. When you choose love, you enter realms of meaning and vitality and purpose and fulfillment. And when you choose fear, you enter realms of barren realms of emptiness and despair, and all of the forms of fear: competitiveness, jealousy, resentment, superiority, inferiority. This is our evolutionary path now. We are in the dramatic transformation from a five-sensory species that evolves by surviving and survives by pursuing external power into a multi-sensory species that evolves by growing spiritually and grows spiritually by creating authentic power, the ability to distinguish within yourself between love and fear and to choose love all the time, no matter what's happening inside of you or what's happening outside of you. Inside of you may be happening despair, rage, anger, frustration, despondency, or an impulse to kill someone or to kill yourself. That's the time to choose love. And what's happening outside of you could be another 9/11 type event or a natural disaster. Authentic power is developing the ability through emotional awareness, responsible choice, and consulting intuition to move through your life, through our experiences in the Earth School with an empowered heart, without attachment to the outcome. And I feel this and see this embodied in everything that Nova is doing. And I'm so grateful to be here, to greet you and to be greeted by you, and to have you as part of my life, and to have you as part of my life, and to be a part of yours. We have no choice about that. Our energy touches always others. It is impossible to be alone. There is no such thing. And we will all see this in our unfolding acquaintance, and then familiarity, and then homecoming into what we are calling non-physical reality. Thank you so very much for this opportunity to be with you.
Thank you so much, Gary, for creating such deep foundations for our discussions and encourage us to think about ourselves and our capacities very differently and choose love over fear. And this provides an immense landscape of possibility, and we're really, really grateful. It also provides a wonderful doorway for our next speaker, Christina Bethel, one of our new Nova scholars and professor at Johns Hopkins University. Christy is going to talk about relational and collective healing and promoting flourishing amid adversity and fragmentation, which could not be more relevant in the world today. So as we look beyond, we are the transformation, we are the medicine. So thank you and welcome, Christy.
Thank you. That was an amazing lead-in. I would have sworn that we connected with each other, but in a way, Gary, we have, because came into the scene in my life when I was a young person. And while I come to you as a Nova scholar and a professor at Hopkins, what I really am is a person with a lifelong commitment to operationalize love in the concrete as a known capacity that all of us can spark that we call flourishing. And I'm going to hope to contribute to our conversation today. I have a few slides, and I'm going to move through them pretty quickly as a story. But in many ways, my story is very much aligned with what Gary just said. I'm mostly going to see this as a way to affirm what he said. So the title of my talk is We Are the Medicine, that well-being is upon us. It's within and between us. And let me just make sure I'm on my screen to change my slide. So my aim is to translate the science that we now have to promote early and lifelong flourishing. And when I was born in the mid-60s, we actually were living with scientific paradigms that have shifted. So we really are on the edge. And I do agree that it's going to be probably another generation and a half. But what an exciting time to be alive. When I was born, we didn't even believe in plate tectonics. We certainly didn't think that, non-human living things communicated with each other. We know that's not true. And we believed in biological determinism rather than understanding that our ecologic environment, and especially our social and inner and relational environments, really are driving a lot of our biology and the things that we see, and therefore are the anchor for how we can promote well-being. We have at least 70 years of really concrete research that I've put on a couple of slides and won't go over with you, but it really is quite remarkable to see what's happening. And where we are now is we know that our lived experiences live in our body and that we can influence how we evolve physically, emotionally, and developmentally by understanding this. The science of adverse childhood experiences, which is based on neuroendocrine immune sciences that show that our lived experiences of safe, stable, nurturing, connected, embodied, connected relationships impact our health and all our biological systems in a way that those that didn't have that are many, many, many hundreds of times more likely to have an array of health problems. For kids, we made a lot of progress also in this area to get really up early in life at those early life relationships that we were talking about. And we've made some progress in naming social determinants of health, and that's important. But we also need to really name the relational determinants of health. And when we look at research, we see huge variations in mental health diagnoses, 5 times, 4 times, 5 times more likely when we don't have those relational supports, even when we have the supports, we're not living in economic insecurity, we have plenty of access to good food and all those things, there's still huge variation explained by relational health factors. So we have this science, and we know that flourishing has been disrupted, but maybe as a way to call us to the learning in the context of the science we have on how to restore. And so the science of restoration is very strong, and it requires us to flip the narrative from removing toxic stress, removing the bad, to promoting the good, to promoting relational health, promoting what we can proactively promote in the midst of the adversity that we have, as a way to both evolve and make the choices socially to address those disparities, to care about one another, to set policies to care about the earth. And there's a huge science that this requires building some skills within us that meditation can help with, and many, many other things. I'm happy to say that I've been part of working with the American Academy of Pediatrics that's formally embraced relational health as the primary focus rather than removing toxic stress. So we know that we can remove toxic stress, but only by promoting relational health and all of and promoting love, basically. I'm going to come right out and say that. So we want to start where we want to end up. And I talk a lot about the flourishing paradigm because it really flips the conversation on proactively promoting what is possible to learn, to develop, even amid adversity. We see huge variation in flourishing for people who have illnesses. Many flourish. Many people without illnesses do not flourish. So we want to focus on meaning and purpose, engagement, relationships, practicing and intending a positive orientation to looking for strength, possibilities, and hope, seeking to contribute, finding what is yours to give, and really restoring our own mattering and being at the watch of our own flourishing. Because if I'm not well and can't anchor in love, like Gary said, I'm not going to be able to do what my part is, and my body will suffer. So we've done some research. I'm not going to show you too much, but how important it is for children to look at families and communities. This isn't just an individual self development activity. This is a we activity. And so we looked at how many families feel they have hope, they have strength to draw on, they do value and understand the importance of connection and know how to connect. And we only find about half in America of families saying that they have that. And so it's very important that we really go the distance to support family well-being, address the inherent pressures and social inequalities that we have, but also lack of opportunities to heal their own trauma and develop in ways that can really support child well-being. We've also done some exciting research, first defining positive childhood experiences, not just adverse childhood experiences. We didn't know what we would find. We didn't know if we would find that that was important, but the absence of the positive, even without ACEs and without the adversity, is actually a negative. And it turns out that what's positive really is how do we relate to one another in the midst of what's hard, so we can leverage the difficulty and use it as a way to stay connected and love one another. We have a huge toolkit, I always say, of practices that haven't been translated: time in, time with, time for. We're going to talk more about food, movement, things like that. We have a rich trauma healing and flourishing facilitation toolkit that needs to be advanced. We are starting to look at the connection between flourishing and global flourishing. I just want to name my colleague Karen O'Brien, and we have a right relations group that they've kind of adopted me as a non-climate change scientist. So there's now this blending of areas. And yet we have to recognize that so many people are like this young girl, of not engaged, not even receptive to the help that could help them. And so we have to be at the watch again of our own well-being as the agents of engagement to build trust and connection with those that have already shut down, and there are many. So we want to really get good at that, and ultimately to advance a series of principles. I'm not going to go over it much, but we can share more about this over the day so that we can, sorry, right now, that we can really embrace the systems change that we need in our mindsets, our relationships, and collaboration, our policies, and our practices. And we're going to talk more about that today.
Thank you so much, Christy. It really is meaningful and impactful work, and centering all our efforts to improve the future of our community, family, and the next generation is really what gives us great reason for hope.
We have a lot of progress to share. Danny will share a little about it. It's an exciting time to be, and it's really what Gary said. We are in that place of it coming out, even if it doesn't look like that.
I think we can feel that. And we are, as you say, going to continue that theme through this session and the next. So next, we're going to explore a new frontier in human health as it becomes increasingly clear that our health crisis at its core is really an energy crisis. And I'm thrilled to welcome Christy Adamo, who will share insights on how adopting a more dynamic and integrated perspective on cellular energy and mitochondrial function might unlock new approaches to our physical and mental health and vitality. Chris, are you here somewhere?
I am indeed. Yes. Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for the intro, Susan. And frankly, this talk is essentially, diving a little bit deeper into the science and practical application of what Susan teed up regarding mitochondrial function. Though this, the imagery here is nowhere near as beautiful as what Susan had presented. So just in brief, and all this is going to be quite brief, mitochondria, as most of you probably realize, are organelles that are in our cells. There are typically many mitochondria within each cell, sometimes thousands of which. So we've got quadrillions of mitochondria in our body. And historically, and I'd say most classically, we think of mitochondria for energy production. All right, and I'm going to go into that a little bit today. This is a wonderful paper, by the way, that I've got the citation for below, but we know now that there is so much more to mitochondria than just producing energy. Producing the substrate for all kinds of chemicals and substances in the body, or neurotransmitters or hormones, genetic material. They're involved directly in homeostasis of a wide variety of physiological processes, and just a tremendous amount of signaling. I think it's where some of the most interesting science is, both within the cell, with genetic expression, but outside of it. So, the central nervous system, our microbiota, circadian biology, metabolic system, immune function. So mitochondria are clearly a big deal in human health and flourishing. And this is just a cross-section of the mitochondrial inner membrane, where a lot of the action takes place with respect to generating energy. And a lot of this comes down to food. So food, we classically think of food in this process, both the macronutrients that provide calories that we consume, and then just thousands of different micronutrients that also play a role in these various stages of what we call the electron transport chain that you see pictured here. What I find fascinating is the impact of light on this as well. So the best way to get this is through sunlight, which unfortunately we've become kind of phobic of in recent years and decades. But the different wavelengths of the blue, yellow, green, red, near infrared that you get from sunlight are activating various aspects or various stages along the electron transport chain that help us produce energy. So critically important. And, when things aren't going well with our mitochondria, there are sort of classic mitochondrial dysfunction diseases like Lee syndrome, these types of things. But I'd say much more relevance today, the chronic disease epidemic that we're in across, essentially every organ system. You see a lot of the diseases and dysfunctions here, are largely attributed to, in a very upstream way, to poor mitochondrial function. And in fact, much of the aging process itself is likely driven by mitochondrial dysfunction. A mentor and colleague of mine, Luigi Frucci, and his group at the NIA, they're running the Baltimore Longitudinal Study of Aging, published some really interesting work looking at this mitochondrial theory of aging, where oxidative stress within the mitochondria is upstream of inflammation. It's somewhat bidirectional. But largely being driven by mitochondrial dysfunction. And, most of us realize just how chronic inflammation has been associated with most chronic diseases and, poor outcomes in acute conditions as well. The really interesting, hallmarks of aging papers. There was a seminal back in 2013 and a more recent one. Mitochondrial dysfunction is a key aspect in this one. I don't have much time to go into it, other than it's just recognized as incredibly important. Now, the good news is, and Susan kind of teed this up, is that we know how to have good mitochondrial health for the most part. A lot of that's going to come down to a nutrient-dense diet, minimizing the ultra-processed foods. It's great to see recognition of that, and maybe even some policy changes that are coming regarding ultra-processed foods. And there's many ways to eat a nutrient-dense diet. Just essentially minimizing the number of packaged food, and eating real whole ancestral foods like you see listed here. Movement, physical activity, connection with others is key. There's really good evidence on social connection in mitochondrial function. If you can do this outside, even better. Sleep and stress management in all its forms. These are really the foundations of optimal mitochondrial health. Now, to sort of go a little bit further with this. So this is a nice image, I think, that captures most of the key ways we can cover mitochondrial health. These are all hormetic. So the ones in the blue are, in many ways, this is the kind of foundation. So eating a good diet, having our circadian rhythms and timed, and eating fermented foods, tribe and clan strategies. I love that this paper calls that out specifically, but also pushing ourselves a little bit outside of our comfort zone. So hormesis, which is, that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And there's a lot of ways to do this. Heat and cold exposure have become quite popular, whether that's, cold shower or time in the sauna, where there's pretty good evidence. Time restricted eating and fasting. You don't want to do this all the time, of course. But doing some form of this is likely going to be helpful. Same thing with exercise. This is a hormetic stressor. Then there's the different things you can do with breath work, which we know have been useful to us in a variety of spiritual and physical ways. All of these challenges are going to help our mitochondria become stronger, alongside the more foundational modifiable lifestyle factors that I mentioned before. So just to tie it all up and to stay on time here, it is clear that mitochondrial function is essential and maybe one of the most upstream factors in human health and disease. Much more to mitochondria than just producing energy. There's still more to be learned in this respect. And really our foundation is just going to be the modifiable lifestyle factors that you see here and beyond. And then, I'd say optimize what you're looking to do would be to tap into some of these hormetic stressors when you can on occasion. So thank you, and been a pleasure to present.
Thank you, Chris. This really encourages us to think about the relationship between our health and our environment in a much more dynamic and energetic way. It's really back to common sense and natural age-old approaches as well. So continuing our focus on energy and vitality with a particular emphasis on mental health, our next speaker is Chris Palmer. Chris is a Harvard psychiatrist, researcher, and author of the acclaimed book Brain Energy, which explores how many mental disorders can be understood as metabolic disorders of the brain and are heavily influenced by our environment. He was eager to contribute to this discussion, and he recorded a message because he couldn't join us today. So we're going to share that now. Thanks.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to speak with you today about a topic that profoundly impacts every one of us, the mental health crisis. Across the globe, rates of mental illness are rising at an alarming rate. Depression has become the leading cause of disability worldwide, affecting over 300 million people. In the United States alone, anxiety disorders impact 40 million adults each year. Rates of autism have quadrupled in 20 years. Rates of ADHD have tripled over the same period. These statistics are not just numbers. They represent lives, families, and communities struggling under the weight of a crisis we are far from solving. This brings me to my work and a new understanding of mental health, one that challenges conventional paradigms and offers a path forward. My research has culminated in what I call the brain energy theory. At its core, this theory redefines mental disorders as metabolic disorders affecting the brain. It integrates decades of neuroscience, psychology, and metabolism research to propose that mental health and physical health are intimately connected. To function properly, the brain requires a finely tuned interplay of metabolic processes. When these processes falter, whether due to genetics, lifestyle, or environmental factors, the consequences can manifest as symptoms we recognize as mental illness. This includes depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety, schizophrenia. They all appear to be rooted in metabolic dysfunction at the cellular level. What this means is that we need to broaden our understanding of mental illness beyond traditional notions like chemical imbalances or even trauma and social adversity. though these undoubtedly do play a role in brain metabolism. We must also examine the broader environmental factors that shape our health, including our food supply. Our modern diets have shifted drastically over the past century. Ultra-processed foods now make up nearly 60% of the American diet, and they are wreaking havoc on our metabolic health. These foods are laden with refined sugars, unhealthy fats, and additives that disrupt energy regulation, promote inflammation, and impair mitochondrial function. The result? Not only are rates of obesity, diabetes, and heart disease soaring, but these metabolic diseases are intricately linked to the rise in mental health disorders. Environmental toxins further exacerbate the problem. Industrial chemicals, pesticides, and pollutants disrupt hormones and damage the very systems our brains depend on to thrive. Together, these factors create a perfect storm, tipping vulnerable individuals toward metabolic and consequently mental dysfunction. But the story doesn't end here. Within this challenge lies enormous hope. If we can recognize that mental health disorders have metabolic roots, we can develop treatments that target these mechanisms. Diet and lifestyle medicine, such as reducing ultra-processed foods, increasing physical activity, and adopting anti-inflammatory or ketogenic diets, have already shown promise in improving outcomes for people with treatment-resistant depression and even schizophrenia. We must also advocate for systemic change. Governments, food producers, and public health agencies must prioritize a healthier food supply, one that supports metabolic health rather than undermines it. By tackling these root causes, we can reduce the burden of mental illness and build a foundation for sustainable mental well-being. The mental health crisis is a wake-up call, not just for healthcare providers, but for society at large. The solutions we need are not confined to therapists' office or hospitals. They are in the fields where our food is grown, the schools where our children learn, and the workplace where we spend so much of our lives. Together, we can reimagine mental health care by embracing the connection between our bodies, our environment, and our minds. The brain energy theory offers a way forward, rooted in science and guided by hope. Thank you. Let's work together to turn this vision into reality.
Well, we're so grateful to Chris for this. He recently spoke at a roundtable discussion convened by the US Senate to discuss the health crisis in the US, and it was so encouraging. There was a strong call to improve our physical, emotional, and social environments across the life course, with a key focus on addressing the unhealthy food systems, especially in the US. And that really provides the perfect segue to our next two speakers, who are working at the forefront of agroecology and conscious food systems and regenerative movements. And first, I'm delighted to welcome Ernesto Mendez, Professor of Agroecology at the University of Vermont's Department of Plant and Soil Science, and he will talk about how food systems can design to co-benefit people, communities, and living environments. Thanks so much, Ernesto.
So good morning, buenos dias. First of all, I wanted to thank Susan for the invitation to present. I'm going to shift us a bit from more of a medical public health approach to really discussing food systems in a very special way. So I co-direct the Institute for Agroecology at the University of Vermont. And I wanted to just tell you a little bit about the importance of trying to institutionalize approaches that open up windows for us to engage in different ways. Engage in ways that are thinking about food systems, including an ecological perspective, but also human health and planetary health. So at the Institute, we're only about 2 years old, and we are trying to really seed a transformation. We are trying to bring research, education, outreach in a way that allows us to move forward some of the food systems approaches that can connect to some of these very interesting public health and medical research that has been presented before. So I invite you to look us up. You can just Google us, Institute for Agroecology. Our website is very informative. So one of the things that we really wanted to do when we established the Institute is to hold ourselves accountable. And how are we going to do the research and education and outreach that is going to be really transformative? So we have these guiding pillars, and it was really important for us to get the university to accept them as our guiding pillars as an institute. And the first one is about deep transformation. So even if we're working at the farm level with farmers, testing agroecological practices that are better for soil and producing healthier food, we want to keep in mind that within society, there are structural issues, societal issues that might be preventing us to scale up some of these practices. So this deep transformation is to bring a systemic approach into all of our work. The second pillar is related to how do we do research? And we want to bring a transdisciplinary approach that goes beyond scientific knowledge to also include indigenous knowledge and other types of knowledge, including, for example, spiritual knowledge. And the way we do research is also participatory. I like to say that participatory action research is basically doing research with people for people. And the last one is to center equity in everything that we do. And starting with how we work together within the Institute, but also how we relate to all of our partners, including organizations, farmers, and institutions worldwide. So I wasn't sure how many people here are familiar with what agroecology means. So I wanted to share how we understand that at the Institute. I like to say that agroecology is an approach, and it is aspirational because what we really are trying to use this approach to achieve these ecologically sound and socially just food systems. We do this through research and understanding and engaging in a transdisciplinary way with all the factors that we know affect our food systems in our society, ranging from ecological to economic and political ones. And then how do we mobilize and integrate a diversity of knowledge systems to achieve these food systems that we aspire to? Susan had asked me to talk specifically about how we're bringing consciousness into our work. And this is an emerging new program, but a very exciting one, I would say. So we have two emerging programs right now. One is a very intentional one on how do we bring consciousness approaches to our transformative agroecology work. And we do this by trying to cultivate these approaches within the Institute, but also doing some research and education around it. For example, we have a graduate certificate in agroecology, and one of the things that we want to do is develop a course on consciousness approaches in agroecology that all of the people taking that graduate certificate would be able to take as an elective. We are also looking at doing some research with farmers, thinking about farmer mental health and resilience, and also how consciousness approaches can support farmers in what has become an incredibly stressful profession. We also have the Agroecology and Planetary Health Program, which I will not talk about because Carlos Andres is next, and he will share with you about that one. But I also wanted to mention some key partners that we are working with. The United Nations Development Program's Consciousness Food Systems Alliance has become a very important partner in doing this work, as well as the Garrison Institute based here in the United States in upstate New York. And more recently, the Osher Center for Integrative Health here at the University of Vermont. So we're really excited about this program, and we're starting to write about it and hoping to stay in touch with you all as we progress. So thank you very much for the opportunity again.
Thank you so much, Ernesto. This work is really an inspiring demonstration of the value of transdisciplinary and cross-sectoral efforts centered around community, and really underscores that the value and power of local efforts. And our next speaker, Carlos Andres Gallegos Riofrio, will continue to expand on this and the importance of relationality that Christy spoke about earlier, this time in the context of infusing other cultural perspectives and ancestral wisdom into regenerative social movements. He is also from the University of Vermont, but has spent over a decade in community-based research across Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, and other places. Welcome, Carlos Andreas.
Thank you very much, Susan, for that very generous introduction. And it's a great pleasure to be a part of this amazing encounter. I would like to start with reflection. I often see these large platforms like the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change or the Intergovernmental Panel for Biodiversity and Ecological Services, the importance of indigenous knowledge, of rural people's knowledge, of Islander knowledge. But I often see it as a very instrumental thing. What these societies around the globe, what has been termed the etnosphere, but Wade Davis are actually doing. Hardly this is thought in terms of the symbolic matrix that drives these communities. And knowledge doesn't happen in a vacuum. It is tied to institutions. It is tied to language. It is tied to rituals. And that has been fundamentally my experience working in rural Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. I started very, very early into this work when I was still an undergrad student in psychology. I wanted to understand a little bit more, something that fortunately Chris already spoke about, the mental health problem, and I focus on depression. As you know, is one of the leading global burdens, one of the leading diseases in the global burden, and also it's one of the leading causes of disability adjusted years. So it was very important, very interested at that time. The crisis is worse these days, and I wanted to understand what is depression in terms of the indigenous world. So I did the most fundamental thing, which is asking. And I spent at least a good year in the field, in rural communities, talking with elders, talking with yachaks, which is the equivalent to a shaman or a medicine person. And at a given point, I thought, like, I'm not really sure that this very prevalent problem that we are seeing in the city, it's also expressed in the same way here in the rural world. And then in a rainy day, there was this young person that was a politician, hardly participating in activities. I asked him, can I run an interview with you and ask you a couple of questions? And he was very open to that. So I started to ask things. And then I realized that this fellow was depressed, but depressed in a different way. This was the guy that was not participating in the community activities. This was the guy that was detached from the community. Then I understood depression as a community level thing. And in indigenous community, this is very powerful. People would say, either you stand up or the community will raise you up. So there's not such thing as I'm going to lay in my bed and that's it. So I'm seeing community as a protective factor, and that makes me reflect on this relational health piece, which it's a process. So it's relational healing and not just health. It is a constant thing happening. So ethnic language is something so fundamental. The way we basically perceive the world. And for indigenous people, you can see that very clearly in the language. I'm going to very quickly share a few slides, perhaps only one. So Yaqui is being sad or blue. And this is from my old research back in 2005. But Yachichik is detriment and damage. Then it becomes Yakichi, which is exploitation. So this is a systematic form of depression. Yakichik Walparikuna are the ways of exploitation, like working the mining, like that picture you are seeing in the bottom of my screen. And Yakipachana, the colony, that terrible collective experience of suffering and dispossession. But Quechua is also a very relational language. So it is a language of reciprocity. Naula, a friend of mine and an indigenous scholar, would say, like, when you use the word to love in Quechua, you cannot simply use the word. You have to use the word and act in consistency to the word. So you have to be consistent. The word, the thinking in the action comes together. And another way of seeing these relationalities, for example, this word, I love it. It was shared by a linguistic in Peru, makichani tai. So imagine a small children hurts her or his hand, and the parent would say, oh, your feeling is my feeling. I'm hurt too. So you can see how it's so deeply expressed. This full work has also led me to understand deeply what happens in indigenous communities, the enormous potential to contribute to the planetary crisis. We work with very small communities that are literally blue zones with very low prevalence of chronic disease, super highly agro-diverse, also with very healthy soils. And then I'm thinking in these powerful frameworks that are real tools for the real world, like the rights of nature. If you have heard of this framework, from where this idea comes from. This was infused by cosmovisions, from the Andean cosmovision, from the way of thinking and living of Andean communities. And I'll conclude there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlos Andres. Your heart-centered approach and holistic vision are so inspirational and much need. And thank you for reinforcing how our approaches to both local and planetary challenges need to be enriched by diverse worldviews. So we are about midway, and we do have time for one or two pressing questions or comments. Because I know we've already covered so much ground. So please put on your cameras to promote that sense of community. While we're waiting, I do want to mention that we do have a special issue in Challenges Journal that we've just announced recently on agroecology and conscious food systems for flourishing of people, places and planets. So follow that link to find out more. And our two last speakers are in fact guest editors on that as well. So we're inviting contributions. Dave, I see your hand is up.
Hi, everybody. We have a snow day here in Canada, so I've got the kids at home with me. I have a question for Gary, actually. Just really quickly, Gary, there is an ongoing observation problem in theoretical physics about the nature of the observer. And it seems like a lot of what we're talking about here hinges on the fulcrum of how we explain the world, whether, all material states are physical states or all physical states are material states. I'm wondering if you could comment on that and if you think we'll see a paradigm shift over the next maybe decade or two in quantum physics, considering the work of people like Nima Harkani-Hamid and stuff like that.
It's been a long time since I've been involved in physics, and I'm not a physicist. I simply became in love with quantum physics and wanted to share it with liberal arts majors like me. But for me, in my experience, there is no, in the new consciousness, put it that way, there's no distinction between the observer and the observed, between the speaker and the word, between the thinker and the thought. And awareness cannot exist without an object of awareness. This is part of the new consciousness. You are what you think. You are what you do. And this, when you look at it, at least when I look at it, shows me a tremendous responsibility for who I am, for what I am doing, for the influence that it has. I hope this is a helpful response to your question.
Thank you so much, Gary. And in our next session later this afternoon, we're really going to be delving more into this concept of unitive consciousness, this sense of a much deeper sense of connection to everything that really breaks down some of these distinctions that we've built up in our current framing. Are there any other questions? Oh, Lynn, perhaps you go first. Lynn, welcome.
Hello, and thank you for such informative, enlightening discussions. I think that this is probably an unspoken in the background. We have mentioned some about the industrial toxicants, but I see a common theme here with mitochondrial dysfunction, our agricultural system, and all the toxicants that we're being exposed to not only through our food, but in our own homes. And my background I am an environmental scientist, and we've done a lot of research with baby teeth, and we're finding on average about 300 toxicants in American children in the baby teeth. And so I just wanted to ask the question if anyone here is acknowledging those contributions to the mental health issues that we're seeing, the depression, the anxiety. There's direct ties to many of these toxicants to those mental health issues, and we're experiencing those exposures not only in our agriculture, but in our everyday lives, in our homes, stuff that we purchase. And so that's one of my missions and my career, and I just wanted to open that and ask for anybody to chime in.
Thank you, Lynn. I mean, this is a huge issue. And Chris, I don't know if you want to take that one, but there's a lot of people very interested in that. Go on.
Sure, I'll take a first stab, but yeah, I couldn't agree more. I didn't talk much about it in mine just due to time limitations, but yeah, I mean, we know with pesticides, household cleaning products, even a lot of the chemicals in our cookware. I mean, these have been, we do a lot of work with autism, have been associated with autism. Now, that's clearly, there's a lot of factors that are going into conditions like autism. They're essentially more body disorders that manifest in ways, neurodevelopmental issues. But yeah, undoubtedly, and I think there's growing awareness of this. I know in functional medicine, we get some folks here. There's been awareness of that for a long time, of environmental toxicants. But yeah, undoubtedly one of the key contributors. And sadly, we're around it so much. So I think where people can filter water, filter air, and so on, that's great. But I think there need to be policy solutions to that too, because there's only so much you can do to clear these things.
I don't know if Ernesto, you would like to comment at all from in terms of the agricultural toxins or not?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I fully agree and think that I think there's an encouraging awareness about the damage of pesticides in agricultural production in quite a few bans internationally, not in the US, but in other countries, just restricting their use so much more. It's hard to link them directly, when in some cases you can, but to a health condition, but we have very strong correlations.
Thank you so much. We also have time for one more question, comment. Gabriel.
Hi everyone, good morning from Bolivia. Like I was saying, I'm a descendant from Quechua and Ainu culture. So I'm very grateful for what you have been doing and sharing with us today. I deeply echo with every one of the contributions. And well, I just want to share you that, well, we have many things in common with the Nova Institute from the Cusco Cultural Center in Bolivia. We have been working on some kind of epidemiology system to prevent many illnesses and diseases in many communities in here. And there's something that we call mancharisga. Mancharisga is like the sickness of the illness coming from the spirit. So we know right now that we are passing through a kind of war sick, a planetary sickness. that we need to attend, and that's why we are trying to get in contact with many alliances as possible. So thank you for what are you doing, and we are here for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle, and thank you for your friendship and support. And I think it's all about expanding our networks as we're making change. I think that probably we need to move on now to the next set of panelists. But as we think about the next generation, we're so grateful to be able to share the beautiful artwork of young artists who participate in environmental awareness programs. And we have the Bowseat Ocean Youth Program. Bowseat is a Boston-based nonprofit that's engaged over 30,000 students worldwide in using art to advocate for our environment. And a huge thanks to Linda Cabot and her team there. So we've got a 2-minute video that showcases some of their beautiful images set to music. So we'll do that before we go to our next speaker. So thanks. We'll play that now, Lachlan. Well, aren't they amazing? That's such a perfect prelude to our next discussions on intergenerational health, prosperity and welfare. And I'm so delighted to welcome Denny Fishbein to talk about the proposed Decade of the Child. Denny is founder and co-director of the National Prevention Science Coalition to Improve Lives, and she's a professor at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. We're also thrilled to welcome Denny as a new Nova Scholar this year. So thanks, Denny. Over to you.
Outstanding. Okay, so hi, everybody. It is an absolute pleasure, and I am so inspired and deeply moved by the previous presentations. I'm speechless, but I'll talk anyway. So Susan has graciously asked me to talk about the project NOVA is supporting to advance a national research and policy agenda that promotes a holistic developmental primary prevention approach to whole child health and well-being. So what this does is bring into play the body of research that many have talked about so far and will in subsequent talks, and operationalizes it so that we can act at a policy level to try to scaffold child development and health. So I'm working with Christy Bethel, and a team of experts and organizational partners to leverage the research and policy experience and tools developed by the National Prevention Science Coalition to Improve Lives. And when I'm done, I'll put a link in for our organization so that we can focus our advocacy on the imperative that we nurture whole child health and well-being. So what we're doing is emphasizing the need to address those conditions that give rise to the adversities that can harm children's physical, emotional, behavioral, social, and academic development, and also to promote conditions that enable children to thrive and flourish in all of these domains. And Christy earlier defined whole child health and well-being for us, so I will get right into how we plan to move closer to meeting those objectives on a population level. So our work is guided by findings and best practices generated over the last 40 years by prevention science, which has basically focused on 2 lines of defense. And yes, the numbers are switched intentionally, but first, so prevention science has shown us how to mitigate the impacts of adverse conditions on development and health. The brain is plastic in childhood, for better or for worse. For worse, adverse conditions on development can impede the brain, the way it develops, and in turn, behavior and social development. But for better, there are a lot of evidence-based strategies that have been developed and well tested, and nurturing conditions that we know can improve overall outcomes throughout the life course. But then I go to number 1, because for me, at least, that's the first line of defense in our playbook, and that's to reduce the risks, the prevalence of those risks in the first place, so that children are not exposed at the outset. The science suggests that we can avert pathways away from these negative outcomes, including systems involvement, that we can break the cycle of intergenerational problems, and we can foster health and well-being through practices that affect each of the influential conditions that are shown in this figure. So there are huge opportunities for prevention experts to collaborate with the federal government, with states, with local officials, with healthcare professionals, and service providers to integrate prevention into their practices and improve the overall health of children. So there's a lot of knowledge, but despite this knowledge, prevention science really has not reached the government and the public sectors. There's very little understanding of what prevention is, or even that there's a science to prevention, and then its value added to public health policy. We know that child health is critical for population health, and yet investments in research and systems improvement are extremely low. And for that reason, these sectors that I have here, healthcare, education, and so forth, are relatively unaffected by prevention science. So basically, in short, what we know is not being translated to what we do. There is potential, though, for population level impacts if we broadly scale up evidence-based strategies. The changes in policies that have been shown to improve outcomes, and actually the normalization of the principles that underlie prevention, so that we are living them in our daily lives. And that's why I cited these 2 articles here on a culture of prevention. So we feel strongly that it's time to act. We want to focus on those factors that influence child development, that can either increase or reduce risk for mental, behavioral, social, and physical health problems, which are currently at unprecedented levels in our society. And our Decade of the Child initiative is intended as a first step in that direction. What we need to do now is more applied research so that we can inform a blueprint for a national policy agenda that effectively prevents these harms and increases exposure to positive experiences. So this is why I slipped up and said the Decade of the Brain, which I was involved in many, many years ago in the 1990s. What we want to do is invoke a similar process that was used for the Decade of the Brain successfully, and working with a team of experts to first encourage NIH to invest in a trans-institute applied research agenda that prioritizes whole child health and well-being, given the role it plays across all disease states. And this is a step that we have already taken with NIH. We also want to motivate congressional members, especially Appropriations Committee members, to carve out funding for NIH that will provide that blueprint that basically supports children's needs through legislation, through agency level practices, and environmental change. We also want to approach the incoming administration about a proclamation that supports this bipartisan agenda. Again, all following the Decade of the Brain process when we're looking for alignments along those lines. And then we want additionally to engage in a public education campaign so we can increase awareness of the importance. So we will also ask Congress to evaluate their own policy priorities and identify opportunities to advance a child-focused policy agenda. And if we can expand on each of these policy areas, we could really make a key difference with, the child tax credit as an example of what we can do to reduce adversity and improve health and well-being. So getting prevention into the drinking water of every community, along with policy change, systems transformation, and a supportive infrastructure, it is critical for whole child health to become part of the public zeitgeist. With the public support, we feel we can make some traction in moving the needle at these levels, at all of these levels, to embrace the concept of whole child health and institute policies that are known to improve the outlook for all children. And I will end there. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Danny. And this is something that really resonates with absolutely everybody. So a wonderful bipartisan issue that hopefully will be just an obvious and common sense approach that we all need to take. And we do invite everyone to read about Danny's amazing career in prevention science that was published in our journal Challenges this year. And I think Alan, who curated that, has put the link in the chat for that. Danny was originally a neuroscientist and a criminologist, exploring how adversity affects brain development, risky behaviour, and life outcomes, including encounters with the criminal justice system. Yeah, I think that link is in the chat. So this brings us to the alarming reality of how our society actively undermines the mental health of young people. And our next speaker, David Wiss, will discuss how we can overcome the commercial determinants of adversity, such as predatory marketing, harmful industries, and inequitable policies that impact the most vulnerable who are falling through the cracks, often into the criminal justice system, rather than receiving the care and the resources that they need. So welcome, David. It's wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Susan. I'm going to talk today about the commercial determinants of health and adversity, specifically how ultra-processed foods link to mental health and criminal justice. You can find more at drdavidwiss.com. We've been studying the social determinants of health for many years now, and you all probably know these are the conditions where people are born, live, learn, work, play, worship, and age, all of which affect a wide range of health outcomes, well-being, quality of life. And now, in capitalistic societies, we need additional frameworks. Introducing the commercial determinants of health. This is an effort to understand how economic influences and incentives impact health worldwide. This can be defined as the systems, practices, and pathways through which commercial actors drive health and equity. I want to recommend the series from The Lancet last year on the commercial determinants of health. It really looks at how commercial actors shape political, structural, and cultural environments. And it's a framework that identifies the role of increasingly powerful transnational corporations that dominate unhealthy commodity industries such as tobacco, alcohol, and ultra-processed foods, which I will be talking about today. It is very clever how some of these often hidden forces are able to shape norms and amplify voices. It's not that they find people and pay them to say things. They find voices that are singing songs at nearby tunes, and they amplify them through media and think tanks and PR organizations. So we know that ultra-processed foods affect global health and personal, familial, community health. And I want to really celebrate Susan's artwork that connects the biology of the human experience with our natural environment, really starting to think about how dietary patterns affect our physiology and our brains and our preferences, particularly linked to the gut bacteria, chronic inflammation, immune dysregulation, and thinking about ultra-processed foods as not just a psychosocial but biological risk factor. So we need to think about disadvantaged communities. Today, I'm going to talk about those with criminal justice involvement. Of course, we're thinking about ultra-processed foods in healthcare settings like hospitals, correctional facilities, and also in eating disorder treatment. Most of the data linking ultra-processed foods to mental health is with depression and depressive symptoms. But today, I'm going to talk about antisocial and aggressive behavior. There are some studies, mostly outside of the US. You could see a large data set here from Iran linking the frequency of ultra-processed foods with psychiatric distress, violence, bullying. And there are protective factors, carotenoids and fiber, inversely associated with aggression. Some pretty interesting correlational research, basically suggesting that there are some associations with food and aggressive behavior. For example, simple carbs, saturated fatty acids, and caffeine. So this now brings us to this idea that perhaps nutrition could be a risk factor for criminal justice involvement, as well as implicated in recidivism, and thereby a major unspoken tool of oppression in our society. So it's bringing the biology back into the question, whether it be early life stress, traumatic brain injury, and of course, chronic exposure to nutrient-poor diets. And it's not just the food, the added sugar, salts, and fats, but the additives, the nanoparticles, microplastics, et cetera, that can affect serotonin, dopamine. And we know a lot of these inflammatory processes can signal at the level of the blood-brain barrier. And yeah, we now have a term, leaky brain, which is important for the gut-brain connection. So nutritional criminology brings a lot of this work together, thinking about how dysbiosis connects to forensic and legal psychology, knowing that the gut microbiome is not only influenced by the host behavior, but the behavior of the host is also influenced by the microbiota. And we see that across a wide range of different behaviors and outcomes. So ultra-processed foods have implications for criminal justice. There's an emerging field called neurolaw, which challenges certain assumptions of free will and suggests that criminal responsibility and blameworthiness do not sit on an even plane. If you're interested in understanding some of the research linking diet to prison systems, there is a recent systematic review. I want to introduce a concept that has really caught my attention that I want to call value-based eating. Dr. Bryan did a randomized controlled trial a couple years ago on 8th graders and attempted to frame healthy eating in a new way, as opposed to just talking about milligrams and ingredients, really thinking about eating as being consistent with values. So for example, 8th graders seeking autonomy from adult and the pursuit of social justice. So the education, and I've been implementing this in my individual and group practices, is really just offering people a way to take a stand against manipulative and unfair practices of the food industry. For example, engineering food to make it addictive and marketing it to young children. Compared with traditional health education, this treatment definitely showed improvement in 8th graders' eating behavior. So this is an effort to harness the motivational power of people and groups and to try to align healthy eating with values that people already care about. For example, feeling like a socially conscious person. We know that traditional nutrition education and self-regulation approaches are difficult, particularly for those with addictive disorders. And so this approach to nutrition education offers an immediate symbolic benefit for changing ways, feeling like a person that's acting in accordance with important values. And it's a framing intervention, and it's effective. With our new data on ultra-processed foods, we have ways to empower people to make choices that not only affect their health, but affect the health of the planet, and help people live up to values that they might already care about, taking a stand against some of this injustice that is perpetuated by food marketers. I'm also trying to promote the idea of value-based eating in the eating disorder community. where there is a lot of contention about food, and I'm deeply trying to help make peace around some of these controversial discussions. My message in a nutshell, I believe nutritional deficiencies and the associated biological consequences should always be addressed before any new psychiatric diagnoses are made and medications are prescribed. I believe that nutrition is not alternative medicine and that corruption in healthcare must be stopped. And I'll meet you right there in the real world, free from conflicts of interest, justice-oriented, and forward-thinking. Happy to share slides and happy to keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. This is really important work. It's a growing area of interest at NOVA, from the aligning values with eating to the dimensions of behaviour and justice that are linked with our food system. So we're really looking forward to collaborating with you more on these things. So continuing the theme on mental health in youth, we're so pleased to welcome Professor Irene Rizzini to share the work that she's been doing in Brazil, engaging youth in climate mitigation as a source of well-being and connection. And this is a project that is funded by NOVA. So it's wonderful to see you, Irene. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Susan. I am so honored to be here. It's such a pleasure to meet so many amazing people with amazing experience in this work. On behalf of flourishing, good ideas, good initiatives, and fight against so many negative waves in our world. So I will start by saying that it is an amazing opportunity for me to be here to share a work we just started, and NOVA Institute has been supporting part of this work. I come from Brazil. I am a professor and a researcher in the city of Rio de Janeiro. And for many years, actually 4 decades, we have been working on behalf of children's rights and fighting inequality and rights violation, violence against children and youth. I will very briefly share with you some ideas very much inspired on the idea of flourishing and a flourishing society, and we begin with the children. So I'm sharing with you here a first message that has to do with children are naturally connected to nature. As they are born, they very easily talk to all elements of nature, not just plants, but all the animals, all existing beings in the planet. And very naturally, they understand things that adults kind of forget or find it hard to remember when they were children, which is this very intimate connection to nature and the curiosity, as we see in the slides, of being close to nature but exploring what's happening around them. It's very often we see scenes of very young children in the early years of their lives talking to ants and other animals and to the plants. So one question that we have been dealing with strongly is, how is it for a young person to be living in a planet that might be no more in the foreseeable future? This expression, climate change, has become, at least here in Brazil, quite present. And sadly, we start seeing that children a little older start talking about it, that they are extremely anxious about what's happening in the world, the obvious impact of climate change and disasters, and how anxious and often paralyzed they feel about it. Just very briefly, we have been looking at some of the impacts. There are so many. There is so much information about this. I'll share only 3 examples. There are 820 million children in the world. Over 1/3 of the children globally are currently highly exposed to heat waves. We feel it in our skin. 1 in 10 children globally, 240 million children, are currently exposed to coastal flooding. It's very common in my country. 600 million children, over 1 in 4 globally, are currently highly exposed to vector-borne diseases such as malaria and dengue, among others. So we have been in our center, the International Center for Research and Policy on Childhood in Brazil, we have been deeply concerned about the impacts, particularly the impacts on mental health of the children and youth in relation to the environmental issues, but also climate change. We have, just in my city, 1/3 of the population live in slums, in high hills, where there's constant flooding. Children often see their families losing their houses and not having where to go. This is very present in our lives here. So we have been looking at opportunities to be helping them, but adults in general, to be able to face reality, not denying it, but also not being paralyzed by it. As you know, COP30 will be in Brazil next year in November in the Amazon region, and we see it as an opportunity for us to do something and to really work with young people so they can have a voice in our event next year. So in this piece of research, we have some support, including from the Nova Institute. We have been looking also at the role of adults in supporting young people and different generations working together. So very briefly, we have signs of hope. We have all these children protesting around the world and giving us a very direct and simple message that I will end my very brief remark by reminding us what they are telling us. They are telling us that there is no planet B. They are telling us that adults have been failing and to understand it and also to do what needs to be done so we have a future. And they are telling us we are the solution. But they need us all as the human collectivity to act together so that they can truly flourish. Thank you, Nova Institute. Thank you, Susan, for bringing us together and to share our experience and to lead this important initiative. Many thanks.
Thank you, Irene. And we're really excited to hear the results of this work as it unfolds and explore further collaborations. So we're reaching the end of our panel and we're going to wrap up with a final group presentation which will introduce briefly our 2024 Nova Media Fellows. This is a flagship program to increase public awareness of the complex intertwined connections between the health of people, places and planet. We support journalists to immerse themselves in projects that promote different aspects of wellbeing, and our 2024 Media Fellows have each recorded a brief message to describe their areas. So that will probably take us the next 10 minutes. We'll run that now.
Hi, my name is Preeti Simran Sethi. I've been a journalist for over 30 years, and I'm also a mental health coach. I am delighted to be one of this year's Nova Media Fellows. My project for this fellowship focuses on highlighting mental health challenges and solutions for a group that is often overlooked: Asian Americans. In recent years, amid a rising tide of anti-Asian sentiment and violence, mental health problems in the Asian community have increased at an alarming rate. Between 2008 and 2018, cases of serious mental illness among Asian Americans ages 18 to 25 doubled. Death by suicide is now the leading cause of death in Asian American young adults. And on the other end of the spectrum, older Asian women suffer from higher rates of suicidal ideation and death by suicide than elders in any other ethno-racial group. This crisis is underreported, underdiagnosed, and compounded by a cultural reluctance to speak about challenges or seek help, largely untreated. Recent research shows that nearly 1 in 5 Asian Americans suffer from mental illness during their lifetimes. Yet they, or I should say we, are 3 times less likely to seek mental health services than our Caucasian counterparts. The reasons for this disparity are complex. They're rooted in systemic oppressions, cultural mores, and the internalized impacts of colonialism. In a series of 6 multimedia features created for mental health professionals, Asian Americans, and the public at large, I'll highlight these seldom discussed issues, detailing cultural and social determinants that contribute to mental health challenges. And I'll also share therapeutic approaches that are directly tied to Asian identity that can not only mitigate problematic outcomes, but foster resilience and support integrative well-being. Long before Western psychology, our communities found ways to survive the atrocities of war, displacement, enslavement, partition, genocide, famine, and the like. These stories are a tribute to our resilience and to our indigenous modes of healing, including mindfulness, breathwork, yoga, and sound healing that directly inform Western psychology interventions. They're a reminder to people of Asian descent that healing is our birthright. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dr. Cynthia Greenlee. I'm pleased to be one of the NOVA Media Fellows for this year. My project is about investigating maternal health in the United States. Part of that includes investigative reporting on maternal death in the United States. For instance, I'm working on a story right now about a preventable death that happened in a Tennessee hospital in the wake of that state's abortion ban. But it's also a project that's about exploring deeply the cultural narratives about maternal health, what it means to be healthy as a pregnant person, as a person who wants to have a family, as a person who's parenting, what it means to be healthy as an infant or child in this country. I'm hoping that I will be able to use my insight as both journalist and historian to get at the roots of what we as Americans really think about the right to health and what it means to be able to thrive in this country, and not merely tell stories of maternal horror stories and deaths in hospital, but also think about the ways we can re-envision and rethink our health and contribute to a transformation where all of us have the right to thrive.
Hey everyone, I'm Rowan Jacobson, one of the new NOVA Media Fellows, and I am here with my friend and co-host, the Christmas Cactus, which is just starting to do its thing. So happy winter, welcome to the dark days. My focus of my fellowship is on light and its impacts on health. And I wanted to bring my friend on to make the point that you are right now on your screen looking at 2 organisms that depend on light as a fundamental nutrient, but only one of them tends to get credit. We know plants are light eaters, but it turns out we kind of are too. We need exposure to natural light to drive all sorts of essential metabolic processes. And a lot of this information is not that well known. It's really new science in the past 10 years or so. So that is why I think it's a great focus for a NOVA fellowship, which can really shrink that lag time between discovery and application, public engagement. So I'll be looking at a few different pieces of the light puzzle. Part of it is what happens when light hits skin, and a lot of that has to do with its effect on the immune system. And this is pretty new information, but it turns out that sunlight hitting skin is a signal for the immune system to switch into an anti-inflammatory mode. So it really sends its immune cells through the body, dampening inflammation. That's big news because chronic low-grade inflammation is turning out to be at the roots of most modern disease. So not just autoimmune disease, but also things like atherosclerosis and other cardiovascular conditions, some cancers, even things like Alzheimer's disease. So that'll be one big focus. But then I'll also be looking at what happens when light enters the eyes. And for this, early morning is the key period that matters. When we get exposure to natural light, and it has to be outdoor light, indoor light is only about 1% the brightness of outdoor light. That signals the body to crank up its metabolism for the day. So energy goes up high, performance increases, and we peak through the daylight hours. And then the flip side of that is what happens at night. When the light dims, that's the signal to the body to start making more melatonin and calm you down and prepare you for a great night's sleep, which is essential for good health as well. So you need that big amplitude that you get from exposure to outdoor light and outdoor darkness. And obviously few of us are getting that because more and more of us are leading essentially indoor lives. And that is especially a problem for kids who, as you know, live their lives mostly through screens, whether it's for work or play. But it's also, it's a problem for everybody, and it's most exacerbated in our most underprivileged populations who often have the least access to natural light. So I'll be looking at some solutions to that as well, and that goes from everything from lighting design and building design to urban planning to even like ways that our schools and hospitals and even prisons could function differently. So just to take a step back, why I think this matters is because for the past 2 million years, we've had a very close and very healthy relationship with the source of light and energy, and that seems to be wobbling lately. So how can we find our way back to a healthy relationship? That's my focus. For Rona and the Christmas Cactus, signing off. Thanks for listening. More soon.
Hi, my name is Maria Peraza-Rose, and I'm an Indigenous Affairs journalist. For the past few years, I've been reporting on and asking questions about the intersection of tribal sovereignty and environment. As a NOVA Media Fellow this year, I'll be reporting on tribal climate relocation and resilience and the impact that climate change has on the mental and physical health of Indigenous communities. Ultimately, my goal with this project is to show how fundamental Indigenous land dispossession is to the creation of the U.S., and how it's not just in the past, it's a present-day problem. Research shows that federal reservations face a higher risk of climate disasters like heat waves and flooding, which means as climate change gets worse and worse, tribes are increasingly put into the position of needing to adapt to dangerous climates or relocate yet again. This threatens not only Indigenous relationships to land, but also place-based practices that are equally important to Indigenous well-being and their mental and spiritual health. With this project that I'm doing now on tribal climate relocation and resilience, I want to show how climate change is forcing a new form of ongoing land dispossession. Throughout history, tribes are forced from their homelands to reservations. Now, the slow violence of climate change is forcing some tribes off of their reservation land. For this project, I'll produce a data set that connects climate vulnerability and risk with tribal lands, as well as information on FEMA aid distribution, federal tribal climate resilience awards, and state land use. I'll also produce a set of stories exploring multiple issues. For example, I'll look at the health of the tribal communities that are relocating, specifically at how forced climate relocation disrupts relationships to land, reshapes access to healthcare, and impacts tribes' ability or lack thereof to grow first foods that are crucial to their culture and health. I'll delve into questions about patterns of FEMA aid distribution to tribes and how federally unrecognized tribes cope with climate disasters, given that they can't receive FEMA aid. And I'll also look at how Indigenous knowledge and practices are necessary for building effective environmental solutions. As I'm sure you can imagine, I have many more questions. And while I'm in the early stages of all these stories now, I do have a first story coming out this December, which bridges the reporting I've done over the past few years on tribal sovereignty and land rights to this topic now of tribal climate resilience. This story looks at how Washington State owns land on the Yakima Reservation in South Central Washington and the complications of returning it to the tribe, even though the state was never supposed to have it in the first place. So it's going to be an exciting year. Thank you all for listening, and thank you to the NOVA team for putting this event together. I'm grateful to be a part of this program and a cohort in the cohort of Media Fellows, and I can't wait to learn more.
Well, thank you all. This has been such an important program for NOVA, and we're looking forward to reading all of your work as it unfolds. So that brings us to another, unfortunately, fairly brief opportunity for discussion about any of these diverse interconnected issues that we've presented. We've got so many themes around energy, light, vitality, and the obstacles to this. So if you have a question or you would like to speak, please put your hand up. And Irini, I know that we cut you off because of time was short. So if there's anything you would like to add while we're waiting for people to think of questions or comments, please do.
Oh, that's great, Susan. I I just had that final message about how children are so clear about what they feel, and these. I'm very happy to be part of this community and to find ways to help children fight immobilization because of a possible end of the world. There's so much to do. There's so much that they can do. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And a huge initiative. Denny spoke about the decade of the child. And I think there are so many people on this call who have an interest in this space. And I know that Dasha was here as well. But we're really keen to get a group of people together who are interested in promoting this concept together. And Denny, I don't know if you want to expand on where you're getting to with the collaborative on the decade of the child that you're already generating, because I'm sure other people would like to join in and become part of that, because this is the future.
Yes, all are welcome. It takes a village, or it takes an entire population of people to engage in this work and make this happen. And I just want to point out that so much of this work, there's so much research, there's so much foundation for this work, which is why we feel that it's time now. The work of all of you who have really formed the basis for the decade of the child. Let's do something with what we know. Let's, get it into practice. Let's get it into the well water. That's what is so important here. And we also need more research to figure out, which is why we're going through NIH as a primary channel here, to figure out how best, what are the best practices in implementation, how best to communicate with the public and with policymakers. There's so many actionable research questions that we've identified. And, Christy and I were sort of, chatting offline here about how so much of this work that you all have engaged in can inform this. And we would like to hear from you about where you think the gaps are and how this can help us address the entire ecology of children. It's not, it just involves every single influence. Children are, are influenced by absolutely every exposure and every experience they have, and that can set their life course and where they're able to flourish and thrive. So we really need to build that up. We've approached NIH. They are interested. And so the next steps, we have a lot to do to develop a strategic plan and really flesh that out. We would love for people to contribute, and we will be going to Congress in the spring when things settle down.
Thank you. And I think there's an open invitation for people to reach out and support that process. I'm not seeing any hands up, and we are coming up on time already. So, but that's not the end, because we've got another session coming up in 2 hours. So I do want to say that the conversation doesn't end here, and I would just like Lachlan to put up the Nova Hub slide, please. This is really an opportunity and an invitation for you to join the Nova Integration Hub if you have more thoughts you would like to share. Tolu will post a link in the chat if it's not there already, so that you have the pathway to join. This is an ongoing virtual community where you can create your own groups and discussion anytime and add to others, and we really do hope to see you there. I really would like to thank all of our speakers for their wonderful, insightful perspectives and for seeding the themes that we're going to continue not only in our next session but in the future work that we do and our collaborations. We're going to have a 2-hour break now until our next session, and that session is going to really look more expansively at our challenges across the whole of society. We've got some wonderful speakers from many different sectors, and we're going to have that theme of consciousness running through it all. And a special thanks to Gary, really, for seeding some really expansive thought at the beginning of this session. So thank you all, and we'll close the session now, but we hope to see you again in 2 hours' time. So thanks, everybody.